This holiday season, there are a lot of new Nintendo Switch owners, whether the fat man brought one down the chimney for you, or you're just a normal functioning adult and you decided to buy yourself one. But you might be wondering, how can you optimize your Nintendo Switch experience? We obviously cover a lot of Switch stuff on this channel, so if you're an OG Switch owner, you've had one for a while, you probably know all these things. But if you're a newer owner, you might find some tips and tricks in here that will really maximize your Nintendo Switch experience and honestly just make it better. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. I've got 5 tricks for you guys to make your Nintendo Switch better and make the experience when playing the system a lot better as well. So if this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like and share the video. But without any further ado, let's talk about 5 tricks to make your Nintendo Switch better. So the first thing we're going to talk about are different control options for when you're playing your Nintendo Switch in handheld mode, because obviously that's one of the draws of the system, the ability to play the system on your television or in handheld mode, thus making it a portable system. Now, when using the default Joy-Cons, you'll quickly realize this isn't very comfortable, and for prolonged playtime experiences, you'll probably want to upgrade to something different or change out some components here. So there's a couple different options that I definitely recommend. If you're cool with the Joy-Cons and you don't mind how they control and how they function, then I definitely recommend like a Satisfy grip. Essentially what this does is it makes it a little bit bulkier when you're playing with your Joy-Cons so that it feels more like a traditional controller. It alleviates a lot of the pain and struggling that you'll get with your thumbs when playing the system in handheld mode the default way, and it's a nice simple solution. They offer it for the Nintendo Switch Lite, the standard Nintendo Switch model, and for the Nintendo Switch OLED. So there's a lot of different ways you can sort of customize your experience. They have different tiers of things you could buy as well. It's one of the easiest ways to get into Nintendo Switch handheld gaming, and one that a lot of people like. Now, if you're looking for something a little bit more, I recommend the Hori Split Pad. Now, what this does is it essentially replaces your Joy-Cons and makes these little beefier Joy-Cons that you then can control your games with. It honestly feels a lot more like a controller. There's some button mappings that you can do with this as well. I really enjoy these, and what's cool about the Hori Split Pads is there's a bunch of different aesthetics you could do with it. You could do just a basic aesthetic, or there's even newer ones coming out like a Sonic the Hedgehog one to sort of customize your Nintendo Switch. I think it's a great alternative to the standard Joy-Con and a really solid thing to use if you want to play your Switch in handheld mode for prolonged periods of time, and it's definitely a highly recommended product. The final option does require a different controller. If you have a Pro controller, this is definitely the best thing for you, and that is the Fixture S1. Now, essentially what this does is it kind of transforms your Nintendo Switch from just being a handheld system into something a bit more, because now you can use your Pro controller, which, let's be realistic, the Pro controller is the best way to play your Nintendo Switch games, especially if you're playing something that requires precision or just something that's overly competitive. The Nintendo Switch screen attaches to the top of this device, your Pro controller attaches to the bottom of this device, and it just makes for an absolutely fantastic experience. Now, like I said, you do have to have a Pro controller for this to really be functional, but if you have a Pro controller, this is the best way to play your Nintendo Switch in handheld mode. It is how I play my Nintendo Switch in handheld mode because it just gives you such a satisfying experience. All 3 of these options are really good. It just really sort of matters what you are looking for when playing your Switch in handheld mode and whether or not you have a Pro controller. But all of these are very solid options and will give you a bit more customization when it comes to your system. When playing your Nintendo Switch in handheld mode, of course you're going to want to download the newest and latest games for the Nintendo Switch via the Nintendo Switch eShop. But did you know that there's actually a trick to make your Nintendo Switch downloads go faster? Now, one thing you'll notice is compared to the PlayStation and Xbox systems, your Nintendo Switch doesn't really download things all that fast. I'm sure there's some logical reason behind it, but I don't really know it because I'm not a techie. But this thing is sort of kind of a techie thing in which you'll be changing a setting on your internet connection in order to make your Nintendo Switch downloads go faster. Essentially what you do is you go into the internet settings of your Nintendo Switch. You then want to select your preferred network, and then you want to change the settings. Within this, there is a setting called an MTU option. Now, this will be at 1400, but by changing it to 1500, it actually improves the speed of which you will download Nintendo Switch games. MTU is a maximum transmission unit, and essentially what this is doing is it's allowing for more information and more data to be downloaded to your Nintendo Switch by making the number increase. Now, 1500 is the cap, so putting it to like 2000 isn't going to change anything, but you will notice a significant difference by changing it from 1400 to 1500 and allowing for faster download speeds on your Nintendo Switch. And when you're downloading these big games, you're going to want something like that. Speaking of downloading Nintendo Switch games, you're going to notice quickly that your memory on the system will just fill up, honestly. If you have a base Nintendo Switch or a Nintendo Switch Lite, you have 32 gigabytes of data to work with. If you have a Switch OLED, you have 64 gigs, and I mean, both of these are pretty paltry in the grand scheme of things. If you're looking at third-party games on the Nintendo Switch, some of these game downloads are 20, 30, even 40 gigabytes that do need updates, so you're quickly going to fill up your space on your Nintendo Switch system. But thankfully, the Nintendo Switch uses micro SD technology when it comes to the storage of the system, and micro SD cards are super cheap. Now, I do have a couple recommendations. My first recommendation is do not buy the Nintendo branded cards, and that might seem sort of weird because usually when you buy things for your Nintendo Switch or any Nintendo product, you want the Nintendo branded ones. But essentially what these are is just a Nintendo branded SanDisk card. There's no real benefit to it. There's nothing that makes it any better, and it's usually overpriced compared to things like the other SanDisk memory cards that don't have the Nintendo branding on them. Now make sure you are getting a branded SanDisk card. There are some fakes out there on eBay and stuff like that. If the deal seems too good to be true, it probably is, but there's a whole bunch of different varieties of options that you can get when adding more space to your Nintendo Switch, and it really just sort of boils down to what suits your needs. If you're someone that gets a lot of downloadable games, you're going to want to get a bigger cartridge, and thankfully these are pretty reasonably priced on places like Amazon, which do have a guarantee that they are authentic cards. This may kind of seem like a no-brainer, but you want to avoid the Nintendo branded cards and just get the standard SanDisk because that's going to give you the most memory, and of course it gives you the most memory at the cheapest price point. Next up is something that should be very obvious if you have a cell phone, but you use your Nintendo Switch a bit different than you would use your cell phone, and that is maximizing the battery on your Nintendo Switch. Now, there's a bunch of different Switch models out there that have a bunch of different battery types, but at the end of the day, maximum, you're going to get 4 or 5 hours out of your Nintendo Switch, and you might be on a long road trip or something and you want to extend that. Well, there's a very simple way to extend your battery life, and that's by entering the Nintendo Switch into airplane mode. Essentially, what airplane mode is going to do is it's going to cut off all wireless transmissions on your Nintendo Switch, thus meaning it's not constantly looking for a Wi-Fi signal, thus utilizing less battery space. So your battery will actually last you a little bit longer than it would if your Nintendo Switch was not in airplane mode. Like I said, this is a pretty basic feature and something that you probably have thought of a million times, but never utilized it for whatever reason. So if you're playing your Switch in handheld mode a lot, I definitely recommend utilizing the airplane mode option in order to optimize your battery, and just the fact that unless you're playing something online, you probably don't need the Switch in handheld mode to be not an airplane mode anyways. And the final trick is going to be when you're playing it in docked mode. Now, obviously, this is not applicable to the Nintendo Switch Lite because you can't dock that system. I mean, it's the reason why it is the Nintendo Switch Lite. It is just a handheld system. But if you have a standard Nintendo Switch system, you might be wanting a better experience when playing your games online. Some games definitely play online better than others, and you might be looking at the competitive aspect of things. Now, if you got a Nintendo Switch OLED, you don't have to worry about this step because the Nintendo Switch OLED comes with the improved Nintendo Switch dock that has an Ethernet cable on it. And we all know that Ethernet ports and LAN ports are much more efficient when playing your games online because you're getting faster transmissions via a wired connection versus a wireless connection, unless you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to optimize your wireless experience. If you have a Switch OLED though, you're in the clear with this, but if you have a standard Nintendo Switch, you can actually upgrade the dock of the system because you can purchase the dock separately over on Nintendo's website. Now, this is really only for if you are playing a lot of online games and you want a better experience, you want to be able to have that competitive advantage and utilize the power of your internet connection, but there is some reason to think that in the future, this dock will play an important role because of the fact that this new dock with the Switch OLED can actually get firmware updates, whereas the standard Nintendo Switch dock cannot. We don't really know the reasoning behind this. We don't know what sort of magic is in the Nintendo Switch OLED dock that'll allow it to do firmware updates and what sort of functionality it'll have in the future. But just looking past that, if you're just looking for a better internet experience when playing it in dock mode, it's definitely a smart idea to upgrade your Nintendo Switch dock to the OLED dock, which you could purchase on Nintendo's website. Alrighty, so those are 5 tricks to make your Nintendo Switch experience better. Like I said, if you're a long-time Nintendo Switch owner, if you've been on this channel for a long time, you know all this stuff because I keep you guys informed. But maybe you're new, maybe you're a new owner of the Nintendo Switch and you're looking for some tips and tricks. I feel like this will really optimize your experience. Now, of course, this is the community, so let people know in the comment section down below some ideas that you have to optimize your Switch experience, some of your personal tips and tricks, because let's help each other out at the end of the day. I mean, we're all just lovers of video games, right? And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button, like and share the video. I messed up saying subscribe because my brain was working too fast. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.